All right, let's rock this Saturday morning streaming. I gotta do this before all my chitlins wake up. Oh, I love the mornings. Sun shining. Got this big front window where all the sun's coming in. It's pretty great. All right, can't read that. I think what I want to talk about this morning is this. Primarily, the thing I'm going to use to jump off is this Joe Rogan talk with Jack Symes. It's number 2193. That is down below in the description. And hey, Steven. Yeah, it happens, buddy. It happens. You know, either listen in or don't, or pop in when you get the chance. I'm going to do my usual talking for a while before I open it up, but I don't know how long. It was really long last time. But this is completely unplanned and unscheduled. So I do want to play this Rogan clip, but then I'm also wondering, I may end up talking a little bit about powers and principalities if Chad or Neal wake up and they're around, because I started watching. Look at that. Speak of the devil. And wonderful man shows up. Because I found that pretty interesting. I think Neal has, I think about powers and principalities a lot, but the way that Neal was thinking about it and framing it and they were talking about it is interesting to me. And so I would like to ruminate and contemplate on that a little bit. And then I'm also I'm also interested a little bit in doing some This Little Corner political conversations, which historically I've always been a little bit hesitant about, because although I think the corner TLC, This Little Corner, has shown some pretty remarkable anti-fragility or resiliency in being able to talk about political stuff and not have it just devolve into total chaos and shit talking. Great Sufjan Stevens song, by the way. Aaron, that's for you, because I know you're Switchfoot. You moved from Switchfoot. This is referencing a Cassidy Vanderkamp talk with Aaron Van Oss. And he was really into Switchfoot, but then he got into Sufjan, and that's my boy. But his new album, fantastic, one of my favorite albums of last year. Also, side note, my wife hates Sufjan Stevens, and it's been an ongoing thing in our marriage where she's just basically told me, it's cool that you like that because I like weirder music. And she's like, but you don't listen to that with me. Listen to that by yourself. Do not, when I'm in the car with you, don't listen to Sufjan Stevens. And I have his Christmas albums, and I love them. And my son loves them, and they will probably be nostalgic for my son as he grows up. And I think my kids will like them too. But they're quirky and they're weird. And my wife hates them. Although his more ballady, kind of traditional hymn songs are cool. And I really like some of his... I'm trying to think of the names of one of them. He has some original Christmas album songs that are fantastic. But I'm just a big Sufjan Stevens fan. But his last album, Javelin, is fantastic. Shit Talk is a great song. Although my favorite song on there, what's the name of the song? This is a little Sufjan rant now. I think my favorite song on that album, I have to look it up. I forget the names of songs. Where you at? Where you at, Sufjan? There he is. See him? Sufjan. Also, Carrie & Lowell is probably I love that. Such a great album. Yeah, Genuflecting Ghost. That's my favorite. So FYI. But politics, circling back to politics, I think we've shown some anti-fragility, so that's good. So I was thinking about dipping my toes, and this is where my first percentile politeness comes in, and my contrarianness, because PVK has said I'm maybe the most contrarian of the contrarians in the corner, and that's maybe true. I don't know if Paul said that or if Sam said that, but if I start talking about politics, it's gonna piss off everyone. Like, my political takes are not popular usually, because I am, because I'm very contrarian and I'm very anti-war. But I was watching so this is how it came up for me this morning, and this again, I'll often say this is not a universal endorsement of everything that's being said in there, and I probably could nitpick and find problems with some of the things in this video. But this video came up in my feed. We're going to go back to Rogan, but I'm going to say this, and then we're going to go back, play some clips of Rogan, then I'll open it up. Then we'll just see where it goes. And I don't know that there's a mosaic vision behind these disparate pieces of things, but probably. Because the Rogan talk is I put out a community post on YouTube, and I said, I think this is Rogan's most TLC adjacent intellectual conversation yet. 'Cause he was essentially talking to a philosopher who identifies as a agnostic atheist, but they were essentially talking about meaning crisis stuff and philosophy and a lot of things that the Little Corner talks about all the time. So that's pretty cool. I'm gonna play a couple clips of parts that I commented on that were pretty salient to me in the YouTube comments, and then maybe, but I want to talk about this political video that came up first. So I'm a pretty big fan of Andrew Callaghan, Callahan. There we go. Who runs? He used to do the show All Pedal No Brakes. Was that the name of the show? I agree, Chad. There is also a mosaic vision, or else I have one, or else I couldn't even be talking about anything. Whether or not it's explicable and articulable is another thing. But whatever I'm talking about and thinking about clearly has a vision, or else I wouldn't even be able to say it. So I totally agree with you. Yeah, I need to watch the rest of Chad's Friday Night Fire stream with Neal. Powers and Principalities, which will be related to a lot of this stuff, actually. It's probably more related to because I just saw the beginning of it, their power part of their thing versus the principality. Because Neal, at least in his beginning framing, he was saying that a principality has a clear head. It's essentially an institution. It has an articulable, visible head. And that's probably related to all institutions are inherently demonic because it's systematized. It's an earthly hierarchy. Whereas a power is more of well, I don't know. We'll maybe get into that. Yeah, and angels are related to all this. Yeah, I don't know. We'll maybe end up going there because angels and demons are very related to all this stuff, which probably ties into UFOs because Rogan was just having this. He's been talking about angels in his UFO talks and demons and things, and he's more open to that kind of stuff. Rogan's just getting more and more fun all the time. But here we go. Let's go back to so Andrew Callahan, which now his main outlet is this Channel 5 news. And he's like a real emergent post mainstream news, YouTube news broadcaster. And what he typically will do is he talks to a lot of the down and out. So during COVID and even now, he'll talk to like a lot of homeless people. My daughter and I actually watched this really interesting documentary that he did. And this is kind of why I trust him, is he's so boots on the ground, where he did a documentary of the Las Vegas tunnels and the people who live in the tunnels and this whole mythos that's around of like these tunnel people in Las Vegas. My youngest likes documentaries, which is pretty cool. It's funny how your kids have different things that you can relate to them about. Like my other daughter, I think, has the best sense of humor. My son he's the most philosophical. And then my youngest daughter is she likes documentaries and she can really, that stuff can hold her attention, where my other two, I think, would be pretty bored by it. But Andrew Callahan, so he has that Las Vegas tunnel documentary, which was cool. He'll go and he goes to a lot of different protests and talks to them. I think he went to Ukraine on the front lines. He goes to really dangerous places. He goes to during like he was probably at the Minneapolis, like all that post George Floyd stuff. He was probably here talking to a lot of people on the ground, and he typically talks to both sides. And I don't think he gets caught up in both sides ism. He tries to just point to both, to all the voices that are out there, and then let you discern things in a really honest way. And I think that's cool. So this video popped up of the title of it. What the hell is it in my comments? It's like Palestinian. It was like Palestinian protests at the Democratic National Convention. Wow. I was just like, that's interesting, because like that's a lot of times you think, so on the most superficial level, right? You would think, well, people that are pro-Palestine are more democratic type people, right? There'd be the people who aren't so Israel. But then what's interesting now with, I think, neoconservatism and neoliberalism is you get things with like the Democratic National Party, and it's just like, okay, all these traditional categories, like the boomer categories or the categories that I grew up in, 70s, 80s, and 90s, they get really weird. And it's just like, which is like, what is the war party, and which is the party of the hawk party, and which is the dove party? Well, I don't know. Like, there are certain political people that you could point to in both parties that you just be like, well, they're clearly pro-war. Also, here we go. Ready? Peace. You know who this guy is? Who's that beautiful man? The only politician I've ever trusted. Ron Paul. And he's not popular. He's the only guy I ever campaigned for when I was in Iowa. This is back when I used to like be involved in politics, which is about the same time that I heard the phrase, which Foxman was saying I was on fire or something in PVK's live stream, the little I was able to participate yesterday. But this is actually from, well, I don't want to tell you who I heard it from, but I love the phrase, politics are the opiate of the masses, riffing on, obviously, Marx. But it's true, because that's the religion of the day. And so the Marx thing still applies. Religion is the opiate of the masses. Well, if you're talking about institutional religion, which is connected to principalities and earthly hierarchies, and if earthly hierarchies are truly demonic and collapse and become the Ouroboros and need to learn to die and resurrect in the Christian spiral, well, then all that's true. Then institutions are inherently demonic. And, so, okay. But back to which is the war party, I don't know. A lot of them are. Like, that's, I don't know. I'm not necessarily a single issue voter, and sometimes I don't vote. Sometimes I do vote. Most of the time, and this is where I'm an American Protestant, a lot of times my vote is a protest vote because I hate the two-party system. I don't know that I voted for a major party candidate since the first time I voted, which I don't even remember what it was like when I was 18. So what would that have been? That'd have been like 2001, 2000. Was there there must have been an election in 2000. That was probably the first time I voted. No, maybe I couldn't have voted then. My birthday's in November, but later in November, so whatever. So back to Andrew Callahan. He's in the middle of this video in a little clip, but he has a guy who he has numerous journalists. I would call them journalists who and it's partially there's comedy woven into it, because there's some Guardian journalist who's just like being ridiculous, yelling at this. I think the guy's name is Saddam, who's the journalist for Channel 5 in this clip that I'm watching, that I watched. And it's fantastic. But anyhow, the broad category, and this is why it's going to piss everyone off. Ah, yes. Love Javelin. Aaron, good to see you, buddy. I'm going to go back and look at the comments. I can't get distracted at the comments. But so there's this Palestinian protest at the Democratic National Convention. And I've not fact-checked all this stuff, kind of like Rogan. And like, don't freak out. But I trust whoever is watching this and the audience of anyone who participates in my live streams and conversations that I have to think for yourself. You know, it's like Rogan says. He's just like, don't believe me. I'm an idiot comment. Don't believe me. Believe me if you want to. Believe yourself. Find your own, what does Sherry call it? Sacred magic, the truth of your own understanding, the integration of what you see as true within your psyche, consciousness, whatever. Let your eye be one, Jesus. If your eye is, what does he say? If your eye is one, then your whole body will be full of light. And if your eye is darkness or divided, your whole body will be full of darkness. Make your vision pure. Take the log out of your own eye. Then you can see things truly. And then whoever is speaking to you or whatever you hear, or all these different things that come in, you will properly discern it and see things for what they are, see to the heart of things, which is like what Jesus did, and the truth will set you free. So with whatever, so then you can take in anything and be incorruptible because it doesn't matter, because you see the truth in all things. So it's just fascinating because these people are protesting these are pro-Palestinian people that are protesting the Democratic National Convention because they see them as connected to, essentially, the way I'm taking it, is the military-industrial complex in Israel. But then probably, like, what would they say if you asked them about Ukraine? Because, like, is that part of the military-industrial complex? I think they talk about that a little bit, of all the, like, continual funding. There's just a lot of people and voices within that video that I wouldn't have expected to be there. And that's the kind of shit I like. Like, that's where my truth radar starts going off. Like, when somebody says something that I don't expect, which is a very Jordan Peterson thing, because, like, or it's that Luke guy from New York that I like to quote that was in a PBK rando, which is pay attention to what people say when they're not paying attention, or pay attention, or like when Peterson talks about when people are ideological and they're ideologically possessed, is you can anticipate and predict what they're going to say, because it's not them speaking. It's an ideology, which could be a power or a principality speaking through them. And then they are a Muppet, or they are being controlled by a spirit that isn't them. They are being manipulated and controlled by a spirit that's manifesting through them at a higher emanating reality. And that spirit is living through them to say things that aren't even their own thoughts, that aren't their integrated, your eye is one thoughts. And in this video, there were people that were saying things that I wouldn't have anticipated them to say. And so then something in my salience truth thing pops up, and I'm like, oh, that makes me want to pay attention. When people are just saying rote things that I expect them to say, I find it boring. Like, even in anything, maybe even in the Orthodox Church sometimes, when I think you're just repeating rote Orthodox truths, I'm a little bit like, I don't find it salient. I don't find it that interesting. I like being surprised. I like being inspired. So that's fascinating. Yeah, and like Anselman very anti-war, which I like. I don't like war. I'm not a big fan. War is the inability to have conflict. Dylan Morin. It's a Luke quote. Also, quick little aside. Maybe I should timestamp this in my own video and come back to it. Now that I'm going to have more time, I'm thinking about adding more structure to my TLC participation and live streams and things, and having like Chad does this. He has the Friday morning meanderings, or the Friday Night Fire, or he has different structured conversations, and he has his estuary thing. I'm thinking about having and this is a very personalist and egoic or seemingly egoic thing, but I'm thinking about doing videos where I just flesh out my Lukeisms. So, like, it could be quotes of other people that I really like and repeat all the time, or it could just be my own phrases that I've made up, like Mosaic Vision. And then I just do a conversation, maybe with someone or by myself, where in a Jonathan Demere way, I play clips. I could have reapers, or people come on with me to have a conversation, to just, in a very concentrated, bounded way, constraint, to talk about PVK's video with Chris Green and Karen and Michael and Rafe Kelly, to talk. They were talking about constraint, but you need that to truly be creative. You need to have constraint. And I traditionally, my video with Cassie just came out actually about creativity. And I was saying, I don't think of myself as that creative of a person. And she's like, I think of you as being very creative, but I'm not a very constrained creative. I'm all over the place. But maybe my creativity could really flourish and grow if I constrain it a little bit more, if I bound it a little bit more. So, so that's something I'm thinking about doing. Now, and I'm done with the politics thing for now, unless it comes back up when I open this up. But I find that interesting. And I know, like, there are people I deeply love in this corner who probably won't like some of that stuff, because I don't. Because, like, that's the thing. If the Israel Gaza Palestinian war thing, like, if Israel is really, and kind of Zionistic stuff is connected to like global military industrial complex and military third parties and Lockheed Martin and essentially corporate capitalists that are benefiting off of war, screw all that. like how evil, how obviously evil is that stuff? And it's manipulating, because you mammonistically use sympathy and safetyism to justify perpetual war and further devastation of families and communities and nations to support military manufacturing. How fucking evil. Very evil. If it's all true. If it's all true. And I don't claim to know truth, but if it's true, I hate that crap. All right. Let's play some Joe Rogan clips about philosophy and things that are maybe slightly more abstract, but do have personal application things, and particular application things with this Jack cat. So let's play some clips, and then I'll open this up. Let's share the screen. Share. Here we go. And are we sharing? Okay, I'm going to play.
All theists think that God is the perfect being. If God exists, God has to be perfect. Like, you can't have a unicorn with no horn on its head. Like, unicornu, one horn. A unicorn has to have one horn. In the same way, a triangle needs three corners. God needs to be perfect. But on this definition, it seems like God isn't perfect. At the beginning of time, if God is the universe, God wasn't perfect then. There was a greater being that God could have been. And even in the fullness of time, perhaps God won't be as perfect as the being which is described by Christians, Jews, and Muslims. So what we're seeing is people embracing, I think this is Goff's term as well. I think he's coming out as this, or maybe I'm coming out for him. He's describing himself as a heretical Christian. So to be a Christian, he thinks, you don't need to believe in the virgin birth. You don't need to believe in the resurrection. You don't need to believe that God's perfect. But you can still believe that there's this big cosmic story that you're a part of, and that there is something God-like at the essence of it all. And I think that's the kind of view that we need to start carving out. Like, theism's on the decline. I was just speaking about the numbers.
The problem with this.
Okay, he said a lot there that you could really break apart and talk about. And I have thoughts on it. I want to hear what I can't remember what Rogan said.
This new idea is that someone's going to be at the head of it. That person's going to be like Kenneth Copeland.
Yeah.
Oh, right, because they play a Kenneth Copeland clip, and somebody's going to be at the head of it, that is part of what Neal and Chad were talking about with the principalities thing. Institutions. Somebody's going to be at the head of it, of this corporate body, this corporation. There's a head, and there's always a head of any body. It's just whether it's implicit or explicit, and is it working in heavenly hierarchies where I think the higher serves the lower. That's the Philippians 2 Christian hierarchy, where the higher dies for the lower, sacrifices itself for the lower, versus an earthly hierarchy where the head eats the tail, the Ouroboros. The head eats the body for its own sake, feeds on the body. All right, so man, he said a lot in there. A lot of it was the idea of perfection. So I had this comment, that's one of the comments that I made, where I said, God's perfection, our becoming is God's becoming, George MacDonald. So there's another, we'll play another clip later, but what I would say on that is, because a lot of this video has to do with, I saw Nathan Jacobs was on Peugeot again, and again, that was a good conversation, although I don't think it I think it's too scholastic, and I don't think it exemplifies TLC personalism and talking about things in a way that isn't so academic. And Nathan Jacobs even says in that video that he's an academic, and he's like, Father, forgive me. That's just what I am. So essentially, I think maybe I'm projecting that. But exactly, this is the thing, is God is a perfect being. Well, what do you mean by perfect? And I can tell, and it's a nominalism realism thing. I can tell that Jack Symes or whatever from this video is, and I said this at numerous points in that, I was sharing clips of it with people, is that he's a nominalist. He lives in a divided world where he's asking all these questions, which I understand. It's very post-cogito Cartesian dualism of mind-body and separating things, but it's not, he just has not been exposed to a lot of, essentially, as far as Christianity, Eastern Christianity, which is not a two-story universe. That's one of my favorite books, which I have not read all of, but Father Stephen Friedman, the one-story universe or whatever. What's the name of the book? I forget. I know I got some, and essentially Canonize the Heretics, because when he said that, like, he's talking about is it Goethe or Gotha or whatever, but the heretical Christianity. Guess who talks about that stuff? The Orthodox heretic. Whose book is that? Get ready for it. Luke Bingo, Peter Rollins. Lacking every perfection. What kind of, and this is Peter Rollins' Church of the Contradiction. What does it mean that God is perfect? And oh man, there's so many things I want to bring in. Chris Green, God, I'm so excited to meet that guy. He's every time that dude speaks. Okay, this is enter Chris Green love rant. I'm so excited to meet this guy because every time that dude speaks, every once in a while there are people who, when they talk, I'm just like, I love everything you say. Like I almost can't even. Jordan Peterson isn't like that. Every once in a while, Jordan Peterson says something that really bothers me. Ian McGilchrist sometimes will say stuff that's not my favorite. There's a lot of people who I love who say many good things, but then there are people who talk, and I'm just like, every little thing you do is magic. Every little thing just turns me on. There's sometimes people who talk who I'm just like, you are lovely. Paul Kingsnorth, like we talk about that. Or Nathan Jacobs. There are people who on paper, again, literally, I would agree with propositionally 99% of everything they say. But then when they talk, they're embodying a spirit that isn't exactly right. Chris Green is one of those guys I can't point to anything that dude has ever said that I've seen so far that I don't love, that I wouldn't just like wholeheartedly endorse. What a guy. And he was talking about stuff like what he was saying about the incarnation and Jesus and Christianity in that PVK live stream. God, I wish I had that queued up right now. It was so good. When he was talking about Jesus walking on water and Jesus' humanity, and he was saying, don't divide Jesus. This is why I talk about the radical implications of personalist knowing and the radical implications of the incarnation. When Jesus is walking on water, he's a man. He's almost like Neo in the Matrix. He's just man this is when Jordan Peterson says, who knows what man is capable of? That, walking on water, commanding the wind and the waves to obey them, moving mountains. You will do even greater things than these. And this is where, like, I don't even think the conversations with Sam and me we're talking about different things. This is where I say things that piss people off probably, that I actually think in the end nobody disagrees. I just think we disagree in our own becoming. But at the end, how can there be disagreement? Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. How can there be disagreement? The Lord is one. So, okay, back to Jack Symes. By the way, in there, they talk about pantheism. They talk about panentheism. At the very beginning, Jack makes the distinction between pantheism and panentheism because Rogan's been talking about a lot recently that he thinks the universe is just God, which is pantheism. But then Jack Symes says the difference, he distinguishes the difference between panentheism and pantheism is that panentheism is that the universe is in God. Somehow, it keeps the distinction between, and I've said before, this is why I like Chalcedon so much, the Council of Chalcedon, because and I've said from that every meaningful intellectual conversation is about the God-man distinction or God-creation distinction. Because that's the line between pantheism and panentheism, and it gets into the radical implications of the incarnation and the stuff that Chris Green was talking about. And it gets into relational ontology and what it means to be. So then the question is, what does perfection mean? And Jack Symes, when he's talking about perfection, he's talking about the God of the philosophers and Hellenistic perfection, which is abstracted perfection. So do these ideals of God, whether it's sovereignty or providence or wrath or any characteristic of God that you could list, justice, mercy, love, do any of these things and attributes exist outside of God? No, or else God would be some kind of sub creation, for lack of a better word, or sub God underneath these greater ideals. And how do those ideals have existence? In what? That's first principle shit. But guess what? The road to hell is paved in first principles. This is what I mean about the radical implications of personless knowing. This is a metaphysical abstraction. But the relation is prior to the relata. The relation is primary. The person is fundamental. The person is the nexus and the locus of all meaning. All right. Let's play another little clip from that, and I'll open it up. Also, PBK will play clips sometimes of Peugeot or Richard Rowland and say, okay, there's a lot in that clip. There's a lot in my fucking clips. Slow them down and go back and play them. That's my ego coming out. All right, let's play some more. Let's go back. Share screen. Contracting. Sitzum. Let's go. Here we are.
Seem to fall out of this as well, right? Which is like we have a concept of what it is to be a person back to our individual subjective conscious minds.
Okay, right there. First off, that's the distinction I make between the autonomous, isolated individual, way back to some early randos video that I tried to have this conversation. I think, who was it with? Sam and Michael? Michael Lady and Sam Tiedemann, maybe? About, I think Jeff named it. It's hard to find unless you go to like thislittle.corner.com or whatever. I think it's called What is Man That Thou Art Mindful of Him? That's what Jeff ended up naming it. But the conversation is about the isolated autonomous individual, and that I don't believe in that because it's the individual collective dynamic, which doesn't hold together unity and multiplicity. And the person is different than that. The person is the relational ontology. There isn't a distinction that you can make here. The individual, so like when he says, what is a person? And then he goes into like subjective, objective. Nope, I don't accept that. I don't like when people start talking about objectivity and subjectivity, get out. I don't accept it.
When we try and think about what it is for me to be me today as the same person born 31 years ago and the same person and the halfway point between that, again, to go back to Zeno, like how am I the same person throughout time? I think the best answer to this is something like, I have the same capacity for conscious experience. If it was stream of consciousness, that would mean every time you drift off during me talking now, then you would die and you'd be born again when your stream of consciousness reemerges. Or if it
What?
was, yeah, like if you say,
I love it. Rogan is becoming more philosophical because, like, this is something I've talked about before. One of my favorite Rogan clips of all time. This is another one that I could do a video on, and I have done some videos on, but in a very controlled way. And it's too long. It'd have to be a series in and of itself. This is where you can double click on anything. It's Russian dolls. You could go infinitely into anything because we live in a world of abundancy, of infinite creativity. But it's the Joe Rogan clip where he and Zara Sahabi debate science. What a great clip. And because Firas Sahabi there is basically talking about radical empiricism versus scientism. And he says science is the faith that the future will behave like the past. And it's related to this clip. But like right there, when I'll rewind it. Oh, I gotta hide this comment. McMo, you're getting too much screen time. When he just says that of like stream of consciousness versus the consciousness that transcends the different streams. Because when you zoom in and zoom out, and what Jack Symes needs to do is he needs to listen to Malcolm Geit's video. Again, thank you, Ups Harris, for this recommendation. The Malcolm Geit lecture for the George MacDonald Foundation or whatever about George MacDonald's imagination. Because this is the imagination. The inside is the outside. There is no subjective thing. This is the infundibular worlds where you are participating in the constant creation of everything that is. Now, the like philosophical materialist, the kind of physicalist will just be like, what? This exists? No, this exists apart from your consciousness. Yes and no, like all things, which is, dang, that's a conversation. Yes and no. This is a conversation that I've been having with Jess P that we need to talk about non-dualism. Because that's another conversation that came up was with Telos Bound, who's like, now that guy's an Orthodox guy, the main guy who runs that channel, and he has a little group of friends, but they had a conversation with Peugeot, and they started talking about non-dualism and the hiddenness and divine feminine. And Peugeot's like, this is stuff you shouldn't be talking about. Jess and I have an ongoing great conversation about that, which is very related to TLC because, and a lot of people misunderstanding me because they don't understand non-dualism and the non-duality that includes duality. And that has a lot to do with propositional, the four P's of knowing and propositional knowing. And what I mean by iconic thinking, because is it ever possible that when you articulate something within propositions, because Peugeot says in there that whenever you say something, this has to do with the divine feminine, sorry, that whenever you say something propositionally, you fall into duality. And the non-duality, there is a non-duality, or like that Cormac McCarthy clip of the unconscious that exists outside of the duality of what you're propositionally asserting. And part of this is right brain. All those things kind of map. However, what I mean by iconic thinking, which I think is original to me, it's related to a little bit of poetic diction, but I think I would argue, because Jess was saying that the poetic fundamentally includes in what it's saying in its propositions, and this is the difference between poetry and prose. It retains the non-duality in its expression. Poetry inherently does that, but I would argue that the evolution of consciousness, and this is what I mean by iconic thinking, is that you could retain the non-duality in the duality of saying things propositionally if you have iconic vision and if you have iconic thinking, which is where you're not married to your ideas, which is the evolution of the spiral beyond the dualism of divided mind ideological thinking. So when I say something, if you don't collapse that into a monad, but it retains its relational ontology, then it includes the opposite within it. So whenever I say something, I'm also saying the opposite. That's the Christologic of Jordan Daniel Wood, but it's within propositions. I don't know if people will understand what I'm saying, but perhaps. Let's keep playing this clip. I'll rewind it a little bit.
Okay. Capacity. The best answer to this is something like, I have the same capacity for conscious experience. If it was stream of consciousness, that would mean every time you drift off during me talking now, then you would die and you'd be born again when your stream of consciousness reemerges.
Okay, that's true. This is, again, the non-duality. That's true and not true. Both of these things are true. Let's keep going.
Or if it
What?
was, yeah, like if you say Joe Rogan is that stream of consciousness, that sequence of experiences that he's undergoing now,
Which
Right.
he is.
and that stops because you drift off, that would mean your stream of consciousness has ended. Think of it like sleep. When you go into like NREM sleep and you don't have any conscious experiences, let's say, you would die according to that view. Or the reviews in philosophy.
Which also you do. I watched this once and I'm wanting to rewatch it, but Sandman, which is based on a Neal Gaiman graphic novel, I think that's the title of it, The Sandman. But it's a Netflix thing, but it's Dream. It's about dreams and dreaming. The dream is fascinating. So fascinating. And Rupert Sheldrake has talked about stuff like this. It's really related to his morphic fields theories and dream, and it's related to soul sleep. God, there's so many things that are. The world of ideas is so fun, isn't it? It's fun and it's good. Oh God, I love talking about shit. Okay, I'll keep playing this and open it up.
Which say you are your psychological continuity. Joe Rogan is the person that believes, I don't know, that Marshall, his golden retriever, is fantastic, and that that consciousness is the fundamental nature of stuff. But then, if I were to strip those beliefs away from you,
Panpsychism.
Psychological continuity view would say Joe Rogan doesn't exist anymore.
Because I don't exist anymore. Yeah, I
'Cause you'll be
get
psychology.
you
So I
up
think
to
it's like
that,
the
but
thing
I
that
don't
gives
get
you your
the
consciousness.
drifting off thing doesn't make sense to me. Because
All right, we'll just stop it there because it's a great conversation. Again, like Paul often says, if you want to watch the whole video, go watch it all. It's awesome. And it's great food for thought for you to figure things out and integrate yourself to become one. Like, again, fractally, like, behold our Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And these things that I teach you today, you should teach diligently to your children. You shall talk about them as you walk by the way, while you lie down, when you rise. They shall be as doorposts. Put them on your doorposts and as frontlets between your eyes. Yeah, which is very related to the Jesus thing and your eye being one. It's very related to the Orthodox idea of salvation is a purification of your vision. Because when you see correctly, when you see things for what they are, truly, then your vision and your act and your thinking all become one. They're integrated. But the biggest thing that I would have with Jack Symes in that whole thing is that it's the nominalist realist distinction, and I think he's living in this either or land that I just don't think is real. It is real, but it's also not real. Again, back to that non-duality. So maybe this whole stream is just a big teaser for me and Jess to do our non-duality duality proposition conversation. I'm gonna message Jeff to see if he wants to pop in on here. Too many abstractions. Okay, and then I'm gonna go back and look at some comments to see if anybody else wants to show up. Let's see if Jess replies to my message. Okay. Otherwise, someone come and play. We got Timmy. Who's a better Tim? I should do a poll. How do I do a poll on here? Marylander or T-Grog? What in the gosh darn heck do you talk about? It's hard telling. It's hard telling, my friend. Exactly. And they talk about that too. Oh, that's a great, man. I need to go back and edit these and put all the references and conversations, because that's the way to really get the mosaic vision, Jonathan Demir style, is all the different things that I reference in my stream of consciousness. If you go back and watch them all and see them all, which is a lot of homework, and it's very much like a Joey broad thing. I don't think it's right to do homework, but if you are so inclined, you could go back and watch all the different things that I reference in clip form. And if I were dedicated, I could put all the clips together, and then maybe you would get a greater vision and see the thing that I'm talking about. But they talk about fools in that conversation. What up, my friends?
What's up,
They talk
y'all?
about the difference between like holy fools and true fools.
What up?
Well,
What up?
the reason I posted that, for one, is because the other night I was talking, it was the Last Girl Country Saints, Lives of the Saints stream, and Sherry said something pretty interesting at the end,
Shock.
and which was, and there's a lot of context, so I'm not trying to take her out of context, but I kind of have to in order to say the joke that I thought
Okay.
of like the next day. But she was making the point that like one could say, we'll say, that following Christ is a fool's errand, or like to try to imitate Christ is a fool's errand, and
For
that
sure.
to try to imitate Mary might be as good as we can accomplish here on earth, just to say, let it be unto me, kind of a thing. Which I have lots of theological thoughts about that, and I've been meditating on it a lot. But I will say, the next day I came up with, if imitating Christ is a fool's errand, well, I'm the fool, and it's the errand I was given. So what am I gonna do?
All right.
That didn't
Let-
land as well as I thought it would. You're reading
That's
you're
like
reading the
every
comments.
joke I've ever. That's every joke I've ever written.
I'm like looking for some facial response at all that I'm still on this live stream, and there was none
I'm-
given.
Well, I'm simultaneously doing things as the administrator of this live
No, you're
stream.
not. You're flipping back and forth between one thing at a time very quickly.
Yeah, well, true.
Breaking
So,
news today
what you
on
said-
Rail Country: Chad broke all of the internet, and not in a good way. After his ridiculous joke, he clearly froze everything. Okay, see, didn't work. It's terrible. Am I roboting? Probably.
I'm trying to
Ooh.
find this quote. It doesn't matter who the fuck said it, I guess.
I think Anselman asked a very good clarifying question. It might be, maybe you and I disagree on this, Luke.
Okay, well, let's dive into that. Disagreement is generativity, baby.
Well, Neal pressed me the other night. He was like, is there anything that, this is not, of course, how Neal asked it, but he was like, is there any difference between you and Luke? And I was like, well,
I heard of that a little bit, yeah.
I'm not nearly as handsome, as I thought right now. But
Oh my gosh.
also, bring back the mustache, dude. The people need it. The people want it. What's stopping you?
My wife.
Boo.
Good. Great reason. Great reason.
What would Sufjan want?
I don't know. That's a good question.
The mustache, dude. I'm having intrusive thoughts. Forgot we were live streaming towards the internet.
Intrusive thoughts are an interesting idea. I don't have very many of them, but I've heard people talk about their intrusive thoughts. And like people who have like continual intrusive thoughts.
Yeah, it's
God,
not fun.
That would suck. That would be really hard.
I'm very grateful that most of mine are just tiny distractions or stupid little jokes. But every so often, they're very funny, very inappropriate jokes that I can only tell to my wife or Chad on the phone.
Yeah. See, and
But
this
she
is
never
also
calls me anymore.
My phone's broke, dude. All I have is my work phone.
we
And
don't talk anymore.
What
I'm-
would Siobhan want?
This is like
Siobhan.
I find this is a must-ask question that always comes up. I find that the split is almost perfectly between men and women. Men
Did
are
you
just
say
like,
a
yeah,
must-ask?
mustaches. Mustaches are sweet.
Oh, a mustache. I thought you said this is a must-ask question.
A must-ask question.
Yeah. Anyways, I only came on here to say that Marylander Tim is clearly the best Tim. So, I gotta go.
Best Tim goes to Tim.
I like both Tims, but thank you for your thing. I think If anybody has any computer advice, I might need a new computer because this one's very old. But now
Talk to Neal.
my internal speaker is just terrible. Like I can barely hear what the hell's going on. So
Yeah, my advice would be to talk to Neal.
So this
touchy.
is back to the let's get back to the should we be like Mary or Jesus thing, because I think there's a lot there. But this is a quote, which who knows, whatever. I just found this quick, but I heard this from my boy Rod. So be bold and mighty forces will come to your aid, which I guess is apparently originally from, do you say, is it Gotha? Is that how you say that?
That's how I've read it. I've heard people say Goethe.
Goethe, there you go. I've heard both too. So
yeah, but it did take me a while to figure out that Goethe, and Goethe are all the same person.
Okay. Yeah. It's like Jonathan Haidt, which apparently is Haidt. I'm almost certain, because he said he's tall and he's not Haidt. He makes that distinction, but everybody always wonders, is it Haidt or Haidt? But I think this quote is true, regardless or not if it came from Goethe.
It's true regardless of the person. Come on, Luke.
Well, regardless or not if it came from him, it came from some person. It came from a person.
Fair enough.
That I feel like we just succinctly just deconstructed Brandon Graham Dempsey right there. Be bold and mighty forces will come to your aid. That will make sense for people who have ears to hear and eyes to see. Because I think, so should we be like Mary or Christ? Yes.
Yeah. My first inclination was to synthesize that Mary was being Christ, and that the divine nature was upon her, was inside her.
She was bringing forth she was receiving with meekness the implanted word, which was able to save your souls.
Exactly.
Maybe my favorite Bible verse, increasingly so. That one is just like about all my theology.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a single Bible verse that is a linchpin like that for me, or a quilting point, one might say. Yeah, the Jesus and Mary thing. I've got a lot of bullshit in my brain. Speaking of intrusive thoughts, I've got a lot of the Protestant, we'll say, disgust sensitivity with some of the activities around the Mother of our Lord.
Right.
Which I'm okay with the name. I'm okay when when you Orthodox people like saying Theotokos. That's a fun new name that I've learned, in the last 5 years or so. So that's, game is game. Call it what you want. But yeah, so I've got a lot of that stuff in my head, but it has been increasingly, and I'll say slowly over time, becoming, that disgust sensitivity is going down a little bit, But all that to say, I'm not hating on the woman. So yeah, I was dealing with a lot of that stuff, but yeah, but I'm not sure if, I guess what I'm wanting to do is the be bold question, to show how it being true and not true at the same time is present within the meaning, basically. That the meaning is almost it being true and not true at the same time.
Yeah. I think that's right.
Because what was it? That basically, if you're bold, God will send aid to you, kind of a thing, right? Yeah, but if you're weak, God will suffer with you in your not having, and if you're and we're given a command not to kind of jump off of I guess it's not a command, but if we're imitating Jesus, one of the temptations was to throw yourself off of a roof and allow the angels to catch you, which sounds pretty much exactly like what that phrase, like Satan could have quoted that to Jesus, and I think his response would have still been the same, which is to not tempt the Lord. And so the question, I guess, then for me is like, what's the difference between the confidence of the Holy Spirit guiding us in every step versus the foolhardy throw yourself off a roof? But is throwing yourself off a roof the same thing as stepping out into a stormy waters? And how the hell would you know which one it is when your foot's you know, when your center of gravity is on the precipice?
Dude, that is a fantastic question, which I would love to double click on. But Chadrick, you got some.
Hey, was it me? You guys want me to talk?
Well, you
Can
came
you
back.
hear
I
me?
thought you had something to
Okay,
say.
okay, yeah. I was thinking about. Been thinking a lot about Mary. Uh, yeah, I was thinking about like McMost just talked about those temptations. You guys talked about those temptations that were laid out to Christ there, and I'm wondering like what kind of temptations Mary had to wrestle with. You know, and like what if it turned out that she like thank God it didn't turn out this way, but like what if she was a terrible mother, you know, who was abusive and you know, like would Christ had turned out in the same would Jesus had turned out to be the Christ that we all love and adore? You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. Well, oh man. Well, I think this will tie into McMo's kind of question of when is what is the right thing to do, and what is the balance between. Somebody spoke about this recently really well. Maybe it was when it was talking about the fool, the true holy fool, and the bad fool, for lack of a better word. A holy fool and a true fool, I guess, is this very distinction. I think it was Peugeot in that telos bound conversation, because I think this is related to Mary, and I think it's related to Jesus stepping out and call on the storm and the waters versus throwing himself off the temple. Is the fool?
Oh, I was referring to Peter stepping off of the boat, not
Well, that's
Jesus. So
yeah,
that might solve the problem though, because Jesus was walking towards Peter, or Peter was walking towards Jesus, and you know Jesus would have just been kind of throwing himself into the abyss. So, but yeah, please continue your thought.
yeah, no, right. So I think it's related to, you cannot serve two masters. You will love the one or hate the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. The holy fool is serving God ultimately, and that's in a way where he doesn't know the future in a controllable, manipulable way. He's not a Machiavellian psychopath where whatever he's doing for a perceived end. That's the ideologue. That would be throwing yourself off the temple so that the devil can give you all the kingdoms of the world. That's transactional kingship. Do this, and then I'll make you the king of everything. And Jesus says, no, what I'm going to do is the opposite of that, and not take it for myself, but lower myself even unto death, and then be set at the right. It's not sitting in the highest place yourself. It's sitting in the lowest place, and at the right time, God will elevate you. That's what Jesus did his entire life, which is completely contradictory. The way I want to illustrate it is like, so yesterday at work, this guy that I was working with, who's probably like my closest friend and guy that I worked with this whole summer, was telling me about this TV. It's an animated movie. I think he said it's on Amazon, called The Invincibles, and it's all these superheroes. And one of them is essentially invincible, and this is kind of like Greek god mythic stuff, and he has a son. It's kind of like Superman, but yet there's a twist to it where he comes from another planet and he's in Earth, and then he has a son who has all his same capacities, but yet they're evolving and they're growing, and he doesn't know how to use them, which is a little bit like Superman-y, except the difference is that this father and this one invincible guy, he's essentially like, he's a god, right? Except that he's not perfect in that he always acts correctly and does everything that he's supposed to do. Like sometimes he has,
Yeah, that's a pretty high bar for perfection.
but sometimes he has like pagan vengeance, where like
That we're all called to.
Yeah.
Even
Like
the
somebody,
Ubermensch.
huh?
Even the Ubermensch, because one of the things just because Aaron was in the comments earlier, but yeah, like every time I think about superheroes, for one, they are just kind of all Superman with a twist, you know. Superman's kind of like the OG superhero, but really the OG, he's Superman, Uber man. So like I always think of Nietzsche with that too. But I think that's partly what I'm getting at, and I think you nailed it when you said that like to follow Christ is to always take the lower seat, is always to wash the feet. It's always to descend into hell. It's all, you know,
Which
the
is again the
resurrect.
powers and principalities thing. The principality. Are you trying to get the head of the table? Do you want to be the head of the body, the corporation? You want to be the leader who tells everybody what to do and systematizes it and goes toward the no place of your utopia?
I'm sure I could serve God so well in a private island. Oh man, I would be the best disciple on Patmos, bro. Just boy, would I, you know, like there's a way in which that I'm sure there was days. I don't want to, you know, the beloved John the Beloved certainly suffered for our Lord. But I bet
Yeah.
there was a couple beautiful days you're just sitting there on the beach in the Mediterranean Sea, just like, man, God is good. He's blessing me with this curse. And so yeah, I think that you nailed it. Like that is the kind of difference. But there is still, I do want to draw the distinction in the specific temptation of Christ, because he's tempted to bow to Satan for the nations. That but I don't remember if the motivation or the temptation to throw yourself off of the temple and to have the angels save you is as much about the world as it is about some sort of religious um, approval or some like sign to your people that you are who you say you are. These people who ask for a sign, will one be given to them? And so I think that when we're like, and me and Jonathan Demir have kind of touched on this. I can't remember if this was public or private, but you know, a lot of times I think if you're of a certain ministerial constitution, we'll say, really believing this stuff makes you very susceptible to coming across as mentally ill, or you know, they call it a complex now, to have a Christ complex, a Messiah complex.
But when you have a Messiah complex, though, again, I think this is the flip that often happens with Christ and Antichrist.
Yep.
To have a Messiah complex, what people mean by that is the opposite, I think, of what Jesus did.
Right. Right. Well, and the contradiction that I'm working out too is the difference between let your light shine before men and don't hide your don't hide your light under a bushel or whatever. But
hide it under a bushel. No. I'm gonna let it shine.
Yeah, and this is probably me just being too agreeable, but I do get a strong sense that, like, you know, you don't have to say everything all the time, and some things are, you know,
shut up. Get behind me, Satan.
A secret is a wonderful thing to have, you know, and to have a glorious secret is just about the best thing you could have in this world. So, but yeah,
a mystery instead of a secret.
That's not the word I was given. But yeah, mystery is fine. Yeah, read it up, bro.
Bible.
Hell yeah. Saturday morning Grail Stream Bible study.
Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, see, just do that, Rogan. You don't need all these psychedelics, and just get off the psychedelic trip. Fast for 40 days and 40 nights, okay? Afterward, he was hungry. Now when the tempter came to him, he said, "If you are the Son of God, command that these stones become bread." Okay. So what's the temptation there?
Yeah, probably.
Because I mean, are there different temptations in all this? Like in the different temptations, is the devil tempting different things, or is it all the same temptation?
Well, you know, I'm very tempted in this moment to put it on very Kierkegaardian spheres of life, basically, starting with the aesthetic phase, the very bodily. You're hungry. The first thing that's pleasing to satiate the dust that we've been given. I'm painting a picture here. So that first one for me is it's not that it's merely physical, but that it's kind of, it has to, in order for Christ to be tempted like we're tempted, he has to have the bodily, physical.
Yeah.
anti-Gnostic temptation.
It's the expediency of his hunger, perhaps, that Chad is saying.
Mm.
Like,
I think there's an element to that,
again,
yeah.
that's a little bit of, isn't that a little bit of that Machiavellian thing, though? You're hungry. What would fix this hungry? Take it under your will and your power and your control. Feed yourself. You can do this, right? You can do this.
Yeah. I'm gonna make some coffee now. Please continue reading or talking.
Okay.
But I gotta mute.
So I'm gonna be reading and interacting with comments and stuff. Power, Mandy says, is the temptation. Stephanie says it's all the same temptation. Prove you're the son of God by doing my bidding. All right, let's keep reading. But I think, McMo, what you said, the bread piece, the hunger piece, I think is obviously pretty key, you know. Okay, verse 5. Then the devil took him up to the holy city, set him on the pinnacle of the temple, and said to him, if you are the son of God, so it is the son of God thing. It's proving you're the son of God. Throw yourself down, for it is written, he shall give his angels charge over you, and in their hands they shall bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone. So like that's not necessarily, so I think there's a twofold, what I'm seeing right now in reading this is why Bible studies are cool. I'm seeing a two-part temptation. So the umbrella temptation is if you are the son of God, and then under that there's like you're hungry. So to satiate your hunger, God, man, make bread, you know. So that's one temptation. And then this one is prove you're the son of God by your authority. Show your authority over these angels, right?
Yeah, but I think something that's connecting for me too is the idea that it shows what Jesus is actually hungry for, which is that kind of like to shown to be the son of God, you know, that kind of his ultimate telos, if you'll forgive me for sounding trivial about it, but the idea that the end of ends is the glorification of the Lamb slain before the foundation is, I think, like wrapped in here too. That like that's what Christ is hungry for. That's the joy set before him that he set in his head in order to bear the suffering of the cross. So yeah, I think that it's like, yeah, connecting that hunger piece from the first thing. It's like he's still hungry, you know, and saying it's like, okay, you're not going to take you're not going to take the bread or whatever, the stones, which he will turn to living stones. So now I'm going to take you to the holy city. You know, what other holy cities do we know? It's Jerusalem and New Jerusalem, essentially. I think that it also, yeah, so there is a connection there. But so I guess in the story, it doesn't seem, I guess what's not coming up for me is that temptation of maybe doing a miracle or proving that you're the son of God is wrapped up in that. But it's yeah, what was more salient that time listening to it was certainly that hunger for the joy set before him, I guess.
Right, word up. David, you have some thoughts? Thank God you're here so that Paul will clip the video at some point.
That's good. That's good.
He's got a new worse nickname than Furry David. I'm not sure if you heard this, Luke.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Father Stephen DeYoung called Messianic
So
Jews
what I was
trans
say
Jews.
is
No, I
find it
did see that
interesting
on
because-
Twitter. Who said that? No,
Pete and poor Pete and poor David ran through the
So what I was
coals.
going to say, Luke, is that I think it's interesting that in some respect, Jesus does all the things that the devil tempts him to do.
Okay.
The feeding of
Expand.
how is the feeding of the 5,000 not turning stones into bread?
Right.
How is rising from the dead not throwing himself down and the angels lifting him up?
Ooh, I like this.
Does he not become king of all the nations?
Right. But just not in the
way
principality way.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, ballin'. God, Jesus is like the most punk rock. God, what a stud.
It is for those who have eyes to see, right? Because there's plenty of people who don't believe what you just said, David, and that's the very reason why they don't think that Jesus was the Messiah.
Yeah.
And then this is also the temptation in the Brothers Karamazov of the Grand Inquisitor, right? He basically says, you didn't do any of this. We did this. The Christendom empire, uh, we fed everyone, we've proven to people that you're the Son of God, kind of a thing. And so, yeah, that's a very good point. It's for those who have eyes to see. I would lend a hand towards our, uh, non-Christian brethren to say that I do think that it is absurd. But I believe it because it's absurd, a la Anselm or whatever.
Right.
So here's a couple baller comments. God, TLC is so awesome. So Matt C says, it's interesting to compare with the I have food, which you do not know about, with the woman at the well, and then connect that with Neal here of Jesus turns himself into bread. The temptation maybe is being self-centered versus henosis by kenosis, emptying yourself out, the Christians assume.
Right. I mean, even in that story where I said, oh, the resurrection is the angels lifting him up or whatever,
Yeah.
is that you compare that to the crucifixion, though, no one stops it. It's not, because in the image, it's you throw yourself down and they'll stop you from hitting the ground. Right. But the crucifixion, you hit the ground. You come up afterwards. Right. Yeah, and McMo, I was going to bring up the Brothers Karamazov as well, because of that idea that the Inquisitor says if you followed the devil, you would have brought world peace. It would have been utopia if you had just followed the devil. That's like part of what that's about.
Man. Yeah. If you need to be fed, become bread. Lou poet.
This is also reminding me of something Cal was talking about with Wayne one time. And because it wraps in the different, like back to Christ and Mary, let it be unto me, and not my will, but thine be done. And then it's a very interesting thing that God also, we're also called to cast our cares upon the Lord because he cares for us. And so there's this weird sense in which we are meant to bring our desire, our truest desire, before the Lord and ask him for it. And at the same time, to basically not awaken the foxes, keep the foxes out before they're supposed to be there, and to wait for the appointed time. And that, like, one of the most overlooked miracles of Christ is that he always does everything at the perfect time.
Right,
that there's a sense of patience and humility and waiting, and it's like there's an artfulness to it. It's very kind of.
Well, if you take the temptation and you compare that to Adam and Eve, there's that teaching where a lot of people are like, no, they would have been given the tree of life, and that even is the end of Revelation, where it's like, wait, I thought we were kicked out so that we didn't partake of this. Just like, no, it's not about the thing, it's about the right time and the right place. It's like the restrictions are not to say no, the restrictions are to say when is right.
Right.
That kind of an idea.
And it's very, this is a very ecumenical point, I believe, because it's just in the scripture kind of plain, which is the idea of Christ not seeing equality with God as something to be clutched, but instead taking the form of a servant. Like that's kind of, that's the pattern, right? Like it is very much a servant even unto death, and so that's like of course you have laws. You kind of are a servant, like servants need laws, kind of a thing. But then there's also the sonship. There's a path that's been made to sonship. And so the laws, instead of being the burdens of a slave or a servant, become the rules of the house, in which, that's just the way it is, because it's the rules of the house. This is our family. We love our family. This is how we do things, why we do them, what we do. Where was I going with that? Oh, yeah, because a servant kind of there is to serve someone is to be patient with them, you know, like if you're married or if you've had dealt with kids or you know whatever, if you've taken care of somebody, maybe even an old person, um, you know, it requires immense patience. And I think that that's the exhausting thing, that even if you know, even if you have the energy to kind of, you know, walk around, you can run 5 miles and you know you're fine. It's that attention and that patience, um, that is the Christ-like loving that Christians are called to, I guess. Sermon done. I'm going to recede into the background for a second.
Was it on the 40 days, or was it like day 35 that this was said? Hello. Hello.
I don't know what's happening.
Well, I was wondering if, like, okay, when the temptations were, when he was tempted, was it like between day 0 and 40, or was it on day 41, given what the reading is there?
So I think it's David. I think must be glitching or something. I think it's when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights afterward.
Okay.
So it's after.
Oh, so afterwards he was given it. Well, you went through all this fasting. Why don't you go get the bread or turn the rocks into bread now? Like, it's interesting. Like,
I don't know what you're saying, because he hadn't eaten. I mean, he was still hungry.
I know. But he intended to fast, right? He intended to fast for all these days. And it's like, after you go through
But
your...
That was great. That was great stuff.
What?
He's roboting.
Well, I was just thinking about, like, oh, you just went through your 40 days and your 40 nights. Of course, your fast is over. You'd be free to go eat some, you know, whatever it is. Go get your, you know, cupcakes and steaks, right? And but he's tempted to, like, go out and immediately turn those rocks into bread. I don't know if it makes any damn sense. I know exactly what I'm saying. Like, just like when I initially hear, like the temptation is about eating itself, but that's not right. The temptation is to break reality and do it expediently.
Expeditiously.
Right? Yes.
That's a really great insight, Chad. No, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
You're roboting a little bit, but yeah, no, I think I'm getting at what you're saying. At first, I thought you were trying to make a comparison to like a newly sober person who's kind of like been 40 days sober or something, and the kind of psychological feeling like that might have, or just the relief of a fast is that you can break the fast at some point. But yeah, I think it's both probably, you know. I think it is the like temptation to eat, but then it's also the temptation to just like Moses in the wilderness striking the rock and the water coming out, to just kind of use divine power for efficiency's sake, you know, or something like that, like a mammonistic use of God's power.
I have a really stupid question. How do we know? Like, do you think that Jesus told this story to his disciples? Like, oh yeah, so here's what I was doing for the last 40 days, and here's what happened to me. Do you think that's how we got this story? Or do we have to take it our faith that somehow?
Yeah, I imagine that's the type of story you'd want to tell your best friends.
Yeah.
I mean, Like they were just walking around in the wilderness with him. They probably like stopped by the spot where it happened, and they were like, and Jesus was probably like, yeah, this is where Satan tried to get me to turn some rocks into bread. And he was probably like, not gonna happen, and they'd probably like all look in wonder and fear, like, holy cow, this guy, resisted the temptation of the devil and he fled. Maybe we can do that one day. I think there was a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah.
Neal.
Sorry, guys, I'm being distracted, but now we have Neal and David back without his camera, so he can just share with us his golden nuggets, but not his beautiful face.
Good morning.
Hey, you're the one where there was a petition not to smile so much, okay?
Yeah, who was telling me? Oh, Mark Parker is just like, he sent me some message, or maybe it was in a comment. I can't remember. Where am I interacting with all these people? And it was something about like, yeah, Luke, you got off easy. Yeah, guys, stop making fun of me for how beautiful I am. It's so mean.
There's a inverse correlation between hotness and video game playing. Yeah, that's why you're not interested in video games. Whenever I'm talking to you about games, you're just like, this is the dumbest topic.
No, I am. So here's the thing. I am interested in, I suppose I would say it this way, the philosophy of video games. And I'm probably a little bit, I don't know. I've changed a lot. I'm probably like, I used to love video games. Like I loved, I'll try to connect with you this way. The last video game that I played all the way through and really loved outside of like sports video games was Final Fantasy VII. I loved that kind of crap. I loved Zelda back in the day. Zelda was like my jam. I loved all the Zeldas. But I've never played any of the really immersive Prince of Persia. I love that game. I've never played the really immersive games. And it's just now it's like, I really don't. When I have some friends, like one of my good local friends who's a deacon at my church, has more kids than I have. Both of them work. They're just like, their lives are very, very busy. Like he'll talk to me. He has like a vinyl record player and then he has video games. He plays guitar. Like he does all these things where he'll talk about going and playing video games. And I'm like, how do you go? Where do you have time?
Yeah.
To go play video games?
It might interest you to know that I haven't really gotten into a game in over 5 years. It's been a long time.
Dang.
But I actually think it's directly tied to maturation process. But that rises coincidentally with my desire to make a game. So.
Well, that's kind of a different thing. That seems like just a healthy spiral of maturity. You go from playing games to making them if you love them. And I love the philosophy of video games. Like I think there's a lot of kind of hidden or repressed wisdom and knowledge in very psychological Freudian ways that video games illustrate to us. Or even like these things that we make, computers, the Matrix, all these different things really in kind of a flipped way are teaching us things about ourselves.
You need to hold on to these ideas because these are like A-class philosophy master's thesis paper titles. Like reading GTA 6 through a Kierkegaardian lens.
So Slavoj Žižek believed that your video game self is actually more true to who you are than the version of you outside. He's like, people think it's harmless, and they're like, no. The real person, what you would be if you could get away with everything, is what you do in GTA.
I want to riff on that a little bit because this is connected back to that Invincible show that I was talking about, which sounds interesting to me, the superhero show where the guy invincible, because that's part of what I guess what happens in that is he really wants his son to grow into his own power and invincibility, and he keeps getting pissed off because his son like won't do it and can't figure it out. Because there's this scene where this portal opens up and these people from another world somewhere else start coming in and they're like destroying stuff, and he's kind of here like Superman to protect the world, and he's just trying to goad his son and encourage his son into fighting them. but he's getting like beat up and doing stuff. And he's like, you have no idea what you're capable of. Just do it. And his son won't do it. And then apparently at some point he just gets pissed off and like just flies into the hole and just starts and essentially like just demolishes that world because it pisses him off.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of this. There's this Flaming Lips song that I love where I can't think of the name of it, but it's like, it's essentially playing off the idea of like, what would you do with all this power? Like if you could do this and this and this, what would you do? Who would you be? And that's very connected to this idea of the video game, which is, and I was thinking, I didn't say this to my buddy because I don't want to be so like annoyingly evangelical, but I was like, the guy that I worship, what he did with his power is he came and died for everybody. Like he didn't come and beat everybody up and destroy the world with a flood. He like bodhisattva'd that shit.
I don't know why this is rising in my consciousness, but there was this superhero movie called Meteor Man in like '94.
Oh, I think I vaguely know what that is.
If I'm correct, it's not that good. But he has basically all the Superman powers, but it shows him and he's flying 3 feet off the ground. And
it is this because it's a black dude. I knew it.
Yeah. And when he's flying 3 feet off the ground, someone just goes, I really hope he gets over his fear of heights. Because you'd think yes, that is absolutely it. So when I grew up across from Detroit, so
well, you know what meteors do? Meteors fall.
But
fantastic.
Yeah, I think was it Cosby is in it too?
I hope so. James Earl Jones is in it. That's worth a watch right there. Don Cheadle.
There was a while there where Cosby almost could have beaten out Hitler for New Satan. It was neck and neck there for a second, but he has receded.
A 25% on Rotten Tomatoes, 5.2 on IMDb.
That's my favorite type of movie. That is like, you might as well have said 10 out of 10. I'm going to have to watch this now.
I can't.
David, I've seen that you're willing to dress up and do silly things. I mean, I should have known since you're in theater, but I think that you need to now get a Bible Man costume and be the corner's Bible Man.
Is this David? Okay.
Just thump it.
I want to take a total aside because of that. Theater man. So family movie night, Friday at the Thompson household. Last night we watched Evan Hansen. Do you guys know what that is?
Oh, yeah.
So it's like and this is something, so like I love musicals. I love that movie. I will just cry my head off to that whole movie. And then just like when people I did a little like one act play stuff. I didn't ever do any theater and acting. I'm not a fantastic singer like Neal, but you like to sing. I like to sing a little bit too, but it's just so fantastic to me when I go to a play or a musical or watch a movie like that. I love musicals. Dudes that don't love musicals, I can't really relate to that much. Like even Rogan will shit on that kind of stuff a little bit. And I'm like, here's the thing. Welcome to this weird dichotomy. You can be a very like bro-y, lift weights, intermittent fast. You can like do all this cold plunges. You can do all that stuff. Cool. Work really hard and like musicals. Like
and you can dance fight. And you can dance fight in West Side Story.
Exactly.
We can say multitudes. No, I can't stand musicals. Well, actually, this is the problem. I love musicals. The music in musicals, I would rather listen to noise for 2 hours straight. And I know
you mean. It's a difficult experience. I think I'm actually going to bring my wife onto the channel at some point to talk about reality, because there's entire theories within theater about how reality works. Because when you're watching a film, you want, if someone gets punched in the face, to look as realistic as possible. But in theater, if you see that, it actually takes you out of the moment and you worry about the actor. Right? That there's actually something about it being fake that makes it more immersive. And so these things that are artificial are actually good.
It's almost like you have to take a leap of faith to participate in
Yes.
theater. So you're you're already sort of biased. You've already projected yourself into the experience.
That's right. That's right. So if you see a play, you could have a scene where someone is sitting on a black box and looks at the other person also sitting on a black box and says, "I'm so glad that we've returned to our favorite restaurant in Paris." If that happened in a movie, you'd be like, "This movie is bullshit." But in a play, they say that, and you're just like, "Okay, we're in Paris. What next?" Like,
I do draw a pretty distinct line between theater and musicals, though, like pure acting,
yes.
like a play, versus the musical. And I think musicals are a great thing, and this is why I have like a love-hate relationship with them. But like my wife likes to listen to show tunes in the car and stuff. Every so often, she'll get in like a show tune mood. And
You're just
this is
explaining why people liked Hamilton, where they were just like,
oh my, don't get me
finally.
started on Hamilton, dude.
You
It
should.
it,
You
it
know,
ruined musicals, hip hop, and American history in one fell swoop.
I really wanted you just to say America. It ruined
you
America.
should. That's hilarious. I need to clip that and play that for my wife because
Lin-Manuel
her and my
Miranda,
daughters love Hamilton so much.
I'm so sorry. I'm just a gruff dude on the internet. Don't listen to me, Luke's family. But yeah, I was like, honestly, Hamilton might have been when I stopped listening to NPR. because
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean.
because I love like Radio Lab and This American Life and All Songs Considered and some of the funny shows too. You know, I grew up listening to Car Talk. Like I
Oh, what
loved
a great
NPR.
show.
But yeah, they went on and on about Hamilton, and I was in college, I guess, at the time, and when I first heard about it, I was like, yeah, this is pretty cool, and I liked some of the remix albums that came out with like popular hip hop people, I guess, at the time. But as it has gone on, and I just don't think it's held up at all. I think that it speaks to a huge amount of dweebery that was present in the early 20 teens. And Lin-Manuel Miranda, God bless him. If I knew him in person, I'd probably like him just fine. But his prolificity drives me up a wall, dude. I can't. There's just something about it that I
He's
just
a
can't
saint. How
stand.
dare you, sir?
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect example too, where there's things that only make sense in the moment, and where there's like, if you see it 20 minutes later, you're just like, this is completely illegitimate and the fakest thing I've ever seen. It's very, very interesting to be encountering pieces of art where the reality of the piece is a real question. Okay, I
Say that
got it.
again. Okay, I'm half paying attention. Say that again. No, he drops
Nope.
out.
I guess it's just me and you. I was also catching up on the comments. But yeah, things that happen for a certain time and place, I think was the kind of overarching point. And that connects
Okay.
back to Christ, honestly. That like the spiritual gift of perfect timing.
Yes. So I want to let's redeem and Steelman Hamilton a little bit. I'll give you this. So the first time I ever watched it, I watched it in Chicago, and my wife and I were there on some mini vacation, and I had not listened to it, and I didn't really know the general play. Like I'd heard, it was in the zeitgeist, and I'd heard some of the songs from my family playing them incessantly. But
I know I've been a hater too, but there are some real high
dude,
points.
so like the like It's Quiet Uptown and Forgiveness, like that song, like if you're no.
Those would have been my on the bottom of my list.
You son of a bitch. I
Yeah,
cried like a newborn baby.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I cry at musicals too, but I don't equate that with like the value of the experience.
I'm not saying it's like transcendently beautiful, but whatever there's something in tears. The message of the marital reconciliation and forgiveness and all that, and the death of his child. I mean, maybe it's just because you don't have children, you callous bastard.
We're talking about
Yeah.
Hamilton, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I had to step away. Oh shoot, I forgot the point I wanted to make.
Well, I'll blabber on, and you remember, interrupt me.
No,
Okay,
I
go.
got it. So my mother would bring me to musicals as a kid, and I really disliked them. Like I thought they were kind of pointless. And then what's strange is following my religious awakening, I'll call it, like 7 or 8 years ago. I like musicals way more now. It's like my entire right brain just woke up, and with the religious awakening, and now I love musical. I saw, this is embarrassing, saw Cats for the first time like 3 or 4 years ago. I freaking loved it.
I wanna.
I had the Cats soundtrack stuck in my head. Now Cats has zero plot. It is zero. That's not true. It does have a plot, and let me do a quick rant on Cats and the plot. But
Lord strengthen me.
yeah. But like I had the soundtrack just going in my head for ages. But what I realized Cats is, it's an anthology or a eulogy of all like the archetypal characters in Western Civ over the last 200 years. You have like a Lord Byron cat who's like the chick magnet, and you've got and basically the only plot in Cats is you've got the old lady who's basically ascending up to the next, like it's kind of like a sad thing on Memories. It's going up to the next heaven or whatever. Anyway,
I have to play this because you brought up Cats, because this is hilarious.
One of my favorite poems is about cats, but I can't remember what the name. I think it's just called Cats. But
Okay,
anyway,
here we go.
Let's watch this.
It's so funny.
Andrew's like, come on, Leo, mate. You know, you're nearly 50, son. The world got to see James Corden as a fat pussy. He was also in the movie Cats, but no one saw that.
heard the movie
And the
was awful.
reviews, oh, shocking. I saw one that said, this is the worst thing to happen to cats since dogs, right? But Dame Judi Dench defended the film, saying it was the role she was born to play, because I can't do this next joke. Because she loves nothing better than plonking herself down on the carpet, lifting her leg, and licking her. Furball. She's old school.
Ricky Gervais is so. Oh,
He's got his moments, definitely. Yeah.
Oh, he's so funny. I've not seen it. That's no commentary on it. I just love that joke, and it's related to comedy stuff, and because apparently, and I like James Corden too, but apparently he was very hurt by that and saddened, and it was like this big comedy kerfuffle debate thing of like, you shouldn't be mean, and Ricky Gervais just doesn't care at all. It's just like, get over it. It's a joke.
Yeah, they serve very different functions. You know, I think that in a lot of ways, Ricky Gervais is the James Corden for the like data bro, materialist, physicalist, transhumanist, where James Corden is just James Corden for the normies. You know.
Can we go back to Hamilton for a moment? Because I got a theory on why Hamilton captivated. So I think most musicals are about harmony, or about reunifying disparate and broken parts. Like that's the whole idea of a musical, is that everybody comes together at the end and is singing in harmony, and there's the grand finale. And so there's brokenness throughout, the musical, but ideally it comes to a better place, unless it's like a requiem or something like that. But the idea of Hamilton is like the brokenness of a culture, and it's the idea of somehow redeeming or bringing back together all of our broken past in the United States in the dream of a better future. And it's trying to synthesize and integrate the hip hop, racial reconciliation, all those things. So it's doing it on meta levels, that it's trying to reunify these pieces in that harmonious, in that final. Anyway, you get the point I'm
Sure.
making.
Yeah, and it was certainly, this is Obama's America was kind of the feeling in a lot of ways, right? And for at the time for good or ill, and now for good or ill. I think that something that's coming up for me right now is that yes, you're right, but that musicals, in the sense that we're talking about, like Broadway musicals, essentially, are almost like the pop or the candy, the supernormal stimuli of what would have previously been operas or tribal dances, tribal myths that we act out, liturgies, right? That we act out and we dance and we sing about, and we enact these kind of narratives. And the modern musical is basically a hyper distillation with minor chances taken, like the least amount of risk taken, basically.
Would you say it's the liturgy of the urban monoculture is the modern musical?
Well, it's right down the street from the stock exchange is the point I'm making, I guess, where it's like, and this is part of the reason why I dislike it, I think, because I make weird music, right? Like, nobody would want to sit for a 2-hour McMo musical, like you're going to come out a changed man.
We're going to have that tomorrow morning anyway.
Okay.
So go to
Sure.
McMo's channel. There you
Neal,
go.
how about like Johnny Greenwood doing all the music for There Will Be Blood? That's weird music, but it's awesome.
I didn't really like There Will Be Blood that much. It was, I'm an oil man. Okay.
I drink your milkshake. That's me coming on Luke's live stream.
Art takes are so. This is the most divisive that I will be talking about politics or art. Neal, God, I love you. I'll let you. It's okay. It's okay. I forgive you.
We forgive one another our trespasses as we've been forgiven.
I forgive you.
Another thing I think that you're right to point out, Neal, is the kind of way in which successful art pieces, or I don't know, I don't think that, I guess, is Hamilton like a one-hit wonder? I don't think so. I think Lin-Manuel Miranda has released other popular things. I can't remember the name of his other musical that came out, but we watched it, and like my wife loves musicals, so I watch a lot. I watch almost all of them, and but anyway, the point in which it was trying to integrate things that the culture at the time felt had not been integrated. Odd use of the word integrate now that I think about it, but that there was a trying to wrestle with kind of what it means to be African American, Afro-Caribbean in Lin-Manuel Miranda's case. But there also seems to be that a art form or a genre like pop or like musicals kind of does, because it's constrained by public opinion. It doesn't have the ability to kind of not become propaganda or something. Oh yeah, and I did see in the chat that they're bringing up Disney films, which are my favorite musicals. But I think those work because up until recently, they were taking these myths, right? They were taking these fairy tales, these myths, and these Shakespeare plays, and basically turning them into musicals for children. So whenever my wife asks me what my favorite musical is, I always say Lion King, because I love Lion King. That movie is like one of my favorite movies of all time.
Top 5, for me.
Yeah, and I think that's probably like a millennial thing for sure, because I don't know anybody younger than me that like loves Lion King like that. Something about seeing young Simba crying at his dad's carcass.
Dude, every time, Waterworks.
Yep.
Well, that was like the last Disney movie that really grappled with death. I can't recall the Disney movie after that was willing to go into the hard questions.
Dude, well, no. Is Disney Pixar all the same now?
Yeah, yep. I mean,
now it
they're
is
owned by the same people. Yeah.
I mean, like, dude,
but
Inside
not like-
Out's the shit.
Yep, I think that Pixar has been making the best films for Disney since Disney bought them, basically. But yeah, the older Disney films, the Lion Kings, I think Mulan was good. You know, but they work. Pinocchio, obviously, that we all know now more than we probably ever would have. But like, I think yeah, there's something about the Disney films kind of digging to a deeper substrata than musicals do. I mean, musicals are very like they can rise, you know, they can elevate to to high art, I think, but like um you know, the simple formula, and it's so dependent on the performance too. That's the other crazy thing. It's like it's almost a sport in that way, that it's like it very much is determined by the execution of, you know, the execution of the play or the musical. So
But
yeah.
if a musical is liturgy, you would expect it to be at the center. I mean, ironically, this gets at what I was talking about last night, where it's kind of that. So I had the priestly in the center. I had the kingly, which is like the cultural bastions of power, and the musical is somewhere between the priestly and the king, in that it's validating whatever this, let's say, the bastions of power and authority. What it's value the it's valuing whatever the urban monoculture is valuing, and it's validating that. That's what the musical does. It instantiates in art, in a liturgical format, what the urban monoculture is celebrating, worshiping at that moment in time. And to the extent it successfully captures that, the musical is successful because it's riding the wave of the cultural focus.
Yeah, I would tend to say that I guess music is kind of goes through all three of the spheres. You know, there's the Lord is surrounded by music in a way, you know, and so I think that yeah, those ripple out, and so it's I get your like I think that what I'm rebelling against, I guess, in this sense, or bringing another view, is that I don't think that what is popular de facto is the one that's connecting best to the most. I mean, there's almost a tautology in the sense that, like, if it's popular, it's connecting to the most people.
Yeah.
But I also think that there's a sense in which, um, unless you are very attentive to the media you consume, you will be hypnotized into. This is like the malleability towards being propaganda that I'm talking about, I guess, which is to say that art can be made famous when the crowd is the one that kind of validates it. Like bad art can be the highest art if people aren't paying attention, kind of a thing. If they're just kind of, you know, whatever. But yeah, that's my little, you know, weird artist spiel. But Luke says he's got to go soon, so I guess
I do. Let's hear what RJ has to say. Well, I just have to go wake up my children so that they don't become just homeless liberal neo-communist losers.
So what I wanted to jump in and add was, as much as people are of two minds about Manuel Miranda most of the time, I do have an appreciation for what he was able to achieve, both musically and as a musical in both Hamilton, specifically with Dear Theodosia, and the family dynamics that he's able to capture there. You know, putting aside who Aaron Burr was in real life, you know, just his character in the show, I think that's balanced in a way that was really brought to a new level for kind of his generation, our generation. And then I also saw him do it again with Encanto.
yep.
And if you look at Encanto as a madrigal, like the entire thing is a madrigal, as opposed like and what made me think of that was someone brought up how opera used to do this, and just kind of looking at how the thing that I really appreciate about Lin-Manuel Miranda is how he's able to weave the multiple voices together like in opera with the hip hop in Hamilton, but he's also able to do that in a more direct way with Encanto, but he even puts in the family dynamics in a completely new way. And maybe that's
Yeah.
just Disney doing Disney stuff, but like you got to give it to the guy. Most like I couldn't sit down and do that. Most people
Yes.
couldn't sit down and do that. And like his kind of shtickish, I'm a goofy theater kid thing is just part of who he is, and I can let that be. But that's my my rant on Mr. Miranda.
Yeah, I agree with you, RJ. And honestly, I do think that my like biggest beef with him is in his performance in Hamilton.
It's
Like
so
I think that I would
performative, dude.
I would
That's the
love
thing
the
that
guy
really
if he
annoys us.
just yeah, I would love the guy if he had just kind of written the play and, casted someone who could rap well and act well.
Cast himself, bro. Like, come on.
Exactly. Like that's crazy, dude. Like that's what it like, I want to reach out to him as a
Now, he
brother in
did a
love,
good job at it. I'm not poo-pooing his performance, but like it's a certain kind of move to do that.
I think if he was my friend in high school and he had written this amazing play and wanted to star in it himself, I would say, yes, you should do this at our high school. I think if he was my friend in New York City and he was like, I'm going to star in the Broadway play I wrote, I would be like, I get it, my man, and I love listening to your rap. But this is New York City, and this is the best people in the world. What are the chances you're the best at writing and the best at acting? Like, you don't need all this fame. People are going to destroy you, brother.
That only works in Good Will Hunting.
Everybody wants to be a triple threat, and I'm going to sign off with the Aristocat line of everybody wants to be a cat because a cat's the only one who knows where it's at. But by wanting to be one, you can overplay your hand. That's the thing with the performativity, going back to earlier part of the conversation. It's like when you're in that theater mode, to be totally authentic is somehow unreal. And that's something I didn't have a chance to put my finger on. So I really appreciate listening to you guys, and I'm going to hop off. But you guys have a great morning.
Thanks
for hopping on, RJ.
Yeah, thanks, RJ.
Final word.
Oh, Mick Mo, I want to get in on that music thing though, but that's
Yeah,
just
I'll be streaming tomorrow, so just hop on my channel, check it out.
Shout outs.
Music streams.
My last 2 cents. I do want to say this is a safe place for musical lovers and theater kids of all types. We're not going to kick you out for being a theater kid. If I'm not kicked out for being a stinky Protestant heretic, then you're not going to be kicked out for being a theater kid.
Or for bad music taste, Like Neal doesn't have to like There Will Be Blood, bad movie and music taste. Or, you can like McDonald's music here. I like Justin Bieber. I like NSYNC,
I like NSYNC.
All right, guys. I think that's it. We should say bye, bye, bye.
I love NSYNC. Oh, snap. We're going to...
Bye, bye, bye.